grabbing power or achieving fame. These are other ways people try to avoid thinking about death. But they should think about death, shouldn't they? Because it's part of life. We can't avoid it. It's going to happen to every one of us. We have to face it. And the best way to face it is through these teachings. And what is more, if we face it, and if we begin to really understand in the depths of our lives that our life is eternal and so is everyone else's life eternal around us, then it gives us a whole new set of values, a whole new set of priorities. What seemed so burningly important before can seem, in the light of the eternity of life, not in the least important, whereas other things that seem not important to us become important. So once Sensei said, we really have to face this matter of the eternity of life. He said, unless people eventually understand that life is eternal, then the world will never be rid of the three poisons. So it is of paramount importance for the happiness of this world, but also very much for the happiness of each one of us. And that's really why I chose to talk about it tonight. So it's for this reason, isn't it, that people need faith. They need a philosophy of life, if you like, that explains life and death to their full satisfaction. This is important to us, and this is perhaps the most important function of religion. So Myoichi Ama, as you know, had strong faith, and maybe he'd be happier having a cup of tea outside. Or a cup of coffee. So as you know, Myoichi Ama's husband had had his land confiscated. Because of his faith, he was really a strong follower of Nichiren Daishonin. And Nichiren Daishonin said he gave his life in this way by giving up his land or by pursuing his faith even though he knew he was going to lose the source of his livelihood, which was his fief. He gave it up and was willing to give it up for the sake of this Buddhism. And for this reason, Nichiren Daishonin said, eternally he will receive the benefits of the Gohonzon. So let's just look at what this man did in terms of benefit that would come to him, because the same benefits can come to us. First of all, if we understand that life is eternal, and if we understand, therefore, that there is no more distance between us and our loved ones who've died than when they're living, that in the same way that we can chant for the good health of one's mother or whoever in Birmingham, we can continue to chant in the same way for those who have died, and they're as close to us as if they were in Birmingham or even just outside in the corridor there. Through that, we realize that we're with those we love eternally too. Those we love, and the Gosho confirms this in many places. We can live again with them. We meet again. But what is more, we're never separate from them, because we can chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So on the Buddha wavelength, if you like, in that deceased person's life as well as our own, we continue to communicate. And we continue to meet, if that is our wish, in lifetime after lifetime. So the reality of this, of course, can become clear to us through really concentrating our lives on those we love during the fifth prayer of Gongyo. Gradually, if we work at it, and many of you will have had such an experience, you can feel that person's life. You can feel even whether they're happy or whether they're not. After my mother died, Sensei sent me just a little message expressing his sympathies. So when I met him the next time, which was on an aeroplane going to Nagasaki in 1983, I thanked him for his message. And he said to me, to my surprise, "Oh, no, don't worry about that." He said, "Anyway," he said, "I hope your mother enjoys the trip." It really rocked me off my heels for a moment. But of course he's right. He's right, you see. Because if I enjoy that trip, my mother will enjoy it. And my father, and my great-grandfather, and all my ancestors, my great friends and so on who've died. Do you follow? We carry them in our life, of course we do. Those people who we've had close connections with. So our life is important to them. Our life condition is important to them. Before she died, my mother was in a nursing home. And I began to see that if I'd been a bit sort of upside down for a period, a bit irritable or a bit negative, struggling away with my practice, and when I went to see her in the nursing home, I would always get a report from the matron saying, "Your mother's been a bit naughty this week." Or, when I go other times, "Oh, she's been as good as gold." It's really incredible, but I really began to spot this. So it was quite an inspiration for me to practice strongly and to make sure that I defeated the negative aspects of my life. Otherwise, I kept on getting these bad reports from the nursing home. So they're all there in this way. And the second point is that if we understand that life is eternal and that relationship exists, we are protecting each other eternally. I chant Daimoku for those who are deceased, and particularly strongly, of course, inevitably, for those who are one's loved ones. In due course of time, they're chanting Daimoku. My life is close to them. They don't know me, but they're chanting Daimoku, therefore my connection with them, which is so close, will benefit from it. We set up a chain of Daimoku, which is eternal, always protecting each other. Do you follow? It's an incredible thought, isn't it? So, Nichiren Daishonin says in this Gosho, he may be watching his wife and children in the mirrors of the sun and moon every moment of the day and night. What does he mean? The mirrors of the sun and the moon, we pray in the first prayer, don't we, to the sun and the moon. This is Ichinen Sanzen. Whatever life state we're in is felt or reflected out to everything in the universe. All the Buddhist gods, the Shoten Zenjin, the sun, the moon, the stars, everything. So, of course, what he's saying is that your Daimoku is affecting your husband, but also, your husband's Daimoku is affecting you. We look upon death, unfortunately, in terms of time and space. There is no time and space in death. This makes it confusing for us. So, what Buddhism says is that this chain of Daimoku is there as protection. The Buddhist gods are mirroring the Daimoku of the old lady Myoichiyama and the Daimoku of the husband. They protect each other in this way. So as I said, in due course, following the guidance of Nichiren Daishonin, she would certainly be praying, wouldn't she, to be reborn with her husband. We can chant to be reborn. As our life reaches its closing time, it would be natural to chant for such a thing. Unavoidable. One's mind would be thinking of the next life. Oh yes, I'd really like to be reborn with, your wife. Maybe you want to be with near a close friend again, or your children, so on. So when someone dies, this is another point. Of course there is a pain in parting. Of course it's human to miss that person. But that soon goes. That grieving, which Nichiren Daishonin was worried about in Myoichiyama, would go once she realizes that what she can best do for her husband is to go on leading a happy life so that he feels her happiness in that lifeline or life link that exists between him and her. And furthermore, that she should chant Daimoku to make sure that he is heading fast towards a happy life, a happy new and fresh life. You can see how this understanding of the eternity of life causes the most profound change in one's whole outlook. In one Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin says, quite humorously, that everyone has to die, but we don't know when we're going to die. Everyone has to die. I think he uses the term, just as brides in the end must become mothers-in-law. The priests, I had 2 priests had dinner in our flat a couple of years ago. And they kept on joking about death. And the senior priest suddenly realized that we might find this a bit odd. And he apologized and explained that to him and his friend, who was also a priest, this just came naturally to them. And the sort of joke they would say was, you better get a move on with whatever it was, because otherwise you may be dead tomorrow. Or, Mitsuko's soup is really good. You better eat every little bit of it, because otherwise you may not get a chance to drink any more of it. That sort of thing. In other words, those 2 priests totally lived and breathed the eternity of life. So in the heritage of the ultimate law of life, that Gosho, I'd like Joe just to read a passage from it, which illustrates so strongly about the eternity of life.
For one who summons up his faith and chants Nam-myoho Renge Kyo with the profound insight that now is the last moment of his life, the sutra proclaims, after his death, 1,000 Buddhas will extend their hands to free him from all fear and keep him from falling into evil paths. How can we possibly hold back our tears at the inexpressible joy of knowing that not just 1 or 2, nor even 1 or 200, but as many as 1,000 Buddhas will come to greet us with open arms?
So, of course, the 1,000 Buddhas is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So, it's also important to take a deep view. By the way, it's 3 minutes past 9, and I think I'm going to talk for another 7 minutes. Does that worry you? Is it okay? I'm sorry. If anyone wants to get up and go, please do, don't worry. So, another point concerns the time of death. People can get terribly upset, of course, when someone dies comparatively young. It's a shock, even more of a shock than death is. Death is always a bit of a shock, but even more so when the person is comparatively young. But in terms of the eternity of life, we have no understanding of what mission that person has. Why his lifespan in this life should have been so short. What is it that he has to do in his next life? One needs to think about that point. Another reason for an early death can be that it avoids some further, even greater disaster. I've had quite a number of experiences of this since I started to practice. I can think of 2 people I knew who were alcoholics. And both died, not kids, they were in their middle age, but nevertheless quite suddenly. And all, without going into details, all the evidence was there that if they've lived on, they would have caused both themselves and those who loved them even greater pain and suffering. So we can't judge these things. But what we should realize, and what will take the pain away and the shock away, is that they go on to another life. And they have a mission and a function to perform in that other life. So in the mercy of the Gohonzon, people will die at the right time. If, of course, they're practicing Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, or if they're closely related to someone who is practicing. At the right time, in the sense of the best time for their happiness and their future life in terms of the eternity of life. So what I'm really asking you in bringing this subject up tonight is that death is not a black, mournful, ghastly, awful thing. When I was young, everyone was dressed in black. They used to have funerals with horses and hearses, and the horses were black, and the hearses were black, and the horses had black ostrich plumes on their heads, and everyone wore black, and they pulled down the blinds in all their houses. Oh, it was awful. It's better these days. But still, people have that fear. There's another extreme that one's quite popular these days. You know, everyone goes off and has a party afterwards and gets drunk just to avoid having to talk about it. Death is not something to be frightened of. Not in the least. Of course, it's an unknown thing. We don't know what it's like until it happens to us. But one knows that life is eternal and that one is going on to something else. And one knows, furthermore, that if we die chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which we always would if we've always practiced every day and it's become ingrained in our lives, then that journey is going to be very short indeed. And we shall definitely find the Gohonzon and continue to develop our Buddhist state. So through reading the Gosho in many places, if we like to put our minds to it, we can get greater and greater understanding of death. Face death, not let it be something that we push out of the way, because it means we fear it. And if we fear death, it eats away at our hearts deep down inside our lives. It deeply affects us. It deeply affects our happiness. It deeply affects the joy of living if there is a dread of death deep inside us. We can't get up in the morning feeling joyful if that fear exists in us. How can we overcome it? Maybe we don't even know it's there. But never mind, either way, whether we know it's there or whether we don't, we should challenge it. This is the point of me bringing this subject up today. How do we challenge it? We challenge it, of course, by not glossing over it when we read about it. We challenge it by asking the Gohonzon, chanting Daimoku, to really understand the eternity of life. Every day in Gongyo, maybe in the personal prayers in the fourth prayer, we can say, I must know, I must understand the eternity of life, working at it in that way. And definitely, in my own experience and many other experiences I've heard, if we challenge it, in some way we'll totally understand it. Some deep realization, which is a living thing in our lives. So we don't want to wait till someone else dies. We want to challenge it now. In another Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin said, you look to other men to be your allies. But I, Nichiren, look to the gods of the sun and the moon, to Taishaku and Bonten as my allies. What an incredible attitude. For him, he didn't care what other people thought or said about him, or whatever their view of life was. His view of life was eternal. His view of life was that provided he chanted Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the universe and all the great gods like Bonten and Taishaku, the sun, the moon, and the stars would always be protecting him and helping him, provided he fed them with his Daimoku, eternally, in lifetime after lifetime. The sensei said, commenting on this, in a recent guidance, I hope that, revering the immense state of life of Nichiren Daishonin, you will live out your lives with a vast and far-reaching insight, making a friend of the universe and conversing with the cosmos. How's that? So when Nichiren Daishonin was being taken to the beach at Tatsunokuchi to be beheaded, he stopped, didn't he, at the shrine of Hachiman, and he out loud challenged the Buddhist gods. He said to them, if you don't do something to save me, you're breaking all the promises you've made eternally to the Buddha. And of course that amazing happening occurred. This he did out loud for our sakes. This should be our attitude. If we're in a jam, that's the way we should chant. For all the Buddhist gods, they've got to come and change this situation so that we can break through and overcome some particular suffering, whatever it may be, or achieve some victory. I'm sure many of you, when you were chanting to win in the negotiations for Taplow Court, that was the way you did it. All the Buddhist gods had to come to that directors' meeting when they made the final decision. And they did it well, didn't they? So, just to conclude, if we challenge the eternity of life, then we will expand our lives hugely. Really we'll become broad, big, great people who can embrace lots of other people and really have a deeper and profounder understanding of life, which brings with it, of course, the enlightenment of the Buddha state. And we shall enjoy life that much more. Thank you very much indeed for being patient and listening. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joe. I missed a bit out, didn't I?
Only a bit of so-so China.
That's right. Causton. Yeah.
Could I just make one announcement? Could the North London young men come to the front one moment to see Ben Morrison and Brian Holdsworth? There's a request we want to make. If the North London young men could come to the front, see Brian Holdsworth, Ben Morrison and Yogi Tanner. Thank you. Safe journey home. Yes, he will do. He's probably going to see Dick first of all. We just sort this out and then we'll come back.